When we think about reality, we often misunderstand what we are seeing. Our minds are built to only evaluate and justify what is necessary to understand for the moment, for the short term. When we begin to dig deeper, we see a world with multiple causal chains clashing from different directions, creating a condition of determinism that can potentially be manipulated. Consciousness gives life the capability to steer its deterministic power, given inherent limitations, in relation to the deterministic condition of the overall situation. Sometimes the deterministic power behind life's consciousness will be enough to win and create a situation where life can flourish. And sometimes that external situational determinism is too powerful, and no matter what we think or believe, we become victims of it. In this video, we'll be discussing the naturalistic fallacy and the moralistic fallacy. When we act in a situation in order to create an outcome favorable to life, we have to deal fundamentally with the conditions of the situation and the probable outcomes. Understanding fallacies gives us the best chance to avoid common perceptive failures and more added power to create the outcome for an everybody wins situation. The naturalistic fallacy is a philosophical concept that refers to the mistaken belief that just because something is natural or found in nature, it is inherently good, morally right, or desirable. In other words, it's the error of deriving normative or ethical judgments from descriptive or factual statements about the natural world. This fallacy was famously discussed by British philosopher G.E. Moore in his 1903 book, Principia Ethica. Moore argued against the idea that one can logically move from statements about what is the case in nature to what ought to be the case in terms of morality. He claimed that the quality of goodness, beauty, and morality cannot be equated with any natural property. Just because something occurs in nature doesn't automatically make it morally correct or ethically justified. The fallacy reminds us that ethical evaluations require a separate set of considerations that can't be reduced to mere descriptions of the natural world. The moralistic fallacy is a philosophical concept that involves making an incorrect inference about what ought to be based on what is the case in terms of morality. In other words, it's the error of deriving descriptive or factual statements about the world from normative or ethical judgments. This fallacy is essentially the opposite of the naturalistic fallacy. While the naturalistic fallacy involves deriving moral conclusions from factual premises, the moralistic fallacy involves deriving factual conclusions from moral premises. For example, assuming that because a certain action or behavior is morally wrong, it must not occur in reality, is committing the moralistic fallacy. Just because something is deemed morally unacceptable doesn't mean it doesn't exist or isn't happening. The concept of the moralistic fallacy highlights the distinction between descriptive claims, the statement about what is, and normative claims, statements about what should be, and warns against conflating the two when making arguments or forming beliefs. Examples: naturalistic fallacy. The statement, violence is natural because animals in the world exhibit aggressive behaviors. In this example, the naturalistic fallacy is committed by assuming that just because violence exists in the animal kingdom, it is therefore morally acceptable or justified for humans to engage in violent behavior. The fallacy occurs when someone attempts to derive a moral conclusion that violence is acceptable from a descriptive premise that animals exhibit violent behaviors in nature. The fact that violence occurs in nature does not automatically make it morally right or justifiable for humans. Example: moralistic fallacy. The statement, people are inherently good, so they would never commit crimes. In this example, the moralistic fallacy is committed by assuming that because people are believed to be inherently good, they are therefore incapable of committing crimes or engaging in immoral behavior. The fallacy occurs when someone tries to derive a descriptive conclusion from a normative premise. The fact that people might be considered inherently good does not necessarily mean that they will never engage in criminal or immoral activities. Reality can be more complex, and people's actions are influenced by various factors, including individual choices, circumstances, and societal influences. The moral judgment about people being inherently good does not automatically negate the possibility of criminal behavior. Implications. The naturalistic fallacy and the moralistic fallacy are two distinct philosophical errors, and their implications relate to how we reason about morality, values, and facts. Here's a breakdown of their implications. Implications of the naturalistic fallacy. Nature and morality. The naturalistic fallacy warns against deriving moral judgments solely from the descriptions of the natural world and emphasizes that just because something is observed in nature doesn't mean it's morally right or wrong. Ethical framework. The fallacy reminds us that ethical evaluations require a separate framework of considerations, principles, and values that cannot be reduced to observations of the natural world, nor can they be separated from it. Avoiding simplistic reasoning. Recognizing the naturalistic fallacy helps us avoid oversimplified reasoning that assumes what is natural is inherently good or bad. It encourages us to critically assess moral claims based on a broader understanding of ethics and values. Implications of the moralistic fallacy. Morality and reality. A moralistic fallacy cautions against making assumptions about the factual state of the world based solely on moral judgments. It reminds us that moral beliefs don't necessarily determine how the world actually operates. By understanding the moralistic fallacy, we can avoid making overly idealistic assumptions about how people should behave based solely on our moral beliefs. It encourages a more nuanced understanding of the complexities of reality. Balancing morality and realism. Recognizing the moralistic fallacy helps us maintain a balance between our moral ideals and a realistic assessment of how people and situations actually are. In summary, both fallacies highlight the importance of distinguishing between descriptive statements about the world and normative statements about morality. By understanding and avoiding these fallacies, we can engage in a more thoughtful and nuanced discussion about ethics and the nature of reality. What is important to remember is not that nature does not dictate what is ethically right or wrong, but frameworks and principles constructed from information obtained by observation of consequence are not somehow detached and separate from nature or objective reality either. We shouldn't make the mistake in thinking that ideas and concepts are separate from the physical world. They emerge out of the physical world and then are reflected back onto it in a feedback loop of circular causation. Don't allow the modern desire to separate thought from reality to cast you into a relative subjective oblivion. Ideas carry the weight of reality, and physical reality can contain the causation of subjective momentum. Don't discount one or the other, but be aware of all the causal chains and the power behind them. If you like this kind of philosophical content, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.